when I'm thirsty. Drink, drink. Hey. It's warm down here. It's hard to breathe. It's burning my eyes, Lord. So hard to see. I'm quite parched now. I need a saying. Come quench my thirst, Lord. Because you're like water for the thirsty. I drink, I drink. You're like water for the thirsty. I drink, I drink. You're like water for the thirsty. I drink, I drink. Water for the thirsty, yeah. I drink, I drink.
It's like water for the thirsty. Truthfully, our souls parched. You will find them when you seek them with your whole heart. It's so hard to stay consistent through the word I'm reading. Cause the time is coming soon when every eye gon' see him in the clouds above. This is about a love that quenches the thirst, but the world offers is not enough. Taste and see from this fountain spring, you'll be lining up to get a drink, refreshing ink flowing out of cups. This life they gotta touch, you liberate them out of cuffs. The faith is undivided trust, created us up out of dust. He's worthy of fresh well of living water for the thirsty. Give her honor the first thing that I do when I'm waking up. It's everlasting life to all who decide to drink it up.
Like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. Like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. Been a hard weekend, it left me high and dry. I've been going through the ringer, I need you in my life. Time seems crazy, I'm stranded in the desert. This life gets so hot, I need a sip of you, God. Cause you're like water when I'm thirsty, yeah. Drink, drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink, drink. Hey. It's warm down here. It's hard to breathe. It's burning my eyes, Lord. So hard to see. I'm quite parched now. I need a saying. Come quench my thirst, Lord. Because you're like water for the thirsty. I drink, I drink. You're like water for the thirsty. I drink, I drink. You're like water for the thirsty. I drink, I drink. Water for the thirsty, yeah. I drink, I drink.
It's like water for the thirsty. Truthfully, our souls parched. You will find them when you see.
You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. Like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty.
What's up, everybody, and Welcome to another episode of Water for the Thirsty. My name is Jared, and with me are my usual suspects, Kendrick and Sharika. This is us doing this a fifth time through the Bible. Yeah?
It is.
Fifth time through the Bible. Fresh conversations and insights. None of our conversations went the same. How many times did we talk about Pharaoh?
We talked. Have we done it every time?
No.
No, it's like the first 2 or 3 times.
Right,
We didn't do it last year.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about this year though.
Yeah, we've evolved, we've grown, and we're looking to grow some more. I'm inviting you guys to join with us. If you haven't already, download the app download the app from your app store. What's up to Avanique and Z? We miss you guys tonight.
Singing, right?
This is supposed to be Ladies First Fridays.
Sorry.
Yeah. Don't worry, but we still shouting them out in case they're online. You know what I'm saying?
Show! We miss you.
Yeah. And to everybody else who's joined us over the past 5 years or 4 years, 5 years, we appreciate you. So I was looking at Genesis this week, and I was wondering how come the Sabbath is a debate. Because I was just reading it, and it said, I was looking at what God did, and He said He made the Sabbath holy, like in the first thing.
What do you mean it's a debate?
Yeah, people, because I have friends
Mm-hmm.
who don't think it's an imperative to keep the Sabbath, right? And that the Sabbath was the command to keep the Sabbath was something that was given to the Jews, right? But as I was reading it here this time, I don't know why it stood out, but it said, He rested from His work and made the day holy. This day is now sacred.
Correct.
Day 1, day 7, but early. And then I reflected on what the commandment was. And the commandment wasn't keep the Sabbath. It was remember
the Sabbath.
To
maintain it holy.
To maintain its already pre-established holiness.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, was there any point where the Sabbath lost its holiness? When the seventh, forget the Sabbath.
The seventh day.
Where the seventh day lost its holiness.
Was there any point? I mean, obviously, yes.
Where?
I was gonna say how. So
You're saying in the Bible? I'm saying obviously yes because
not whether we treat it to be holy.
No.
Whether it was denounced.
Oh, you're saying
okay.
Okay, I got you.
At any point from
where
it was no longer considered holy.
Right.
I haven't seen one.
So every seventh day is now a holy time from
the first day.
From the time man arrived.
Yeah.
From the beginning of when man arrived, not time.
From when men arrived.
Yes.
Every seventh day is a special day.
Correct.
I never looked at it from that side of it. I've always been in the conversation.
So,
as long as Saturday, because Seventh-day Adventists keep Saturday. Jews keep Saturday.
Whatever
so
as long as is.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So now you got to figure out what the seventh day is.
But it seems like there may have not have been Sabbath in heaven before we arrived.
Maybe.
There apparently wasn't.
No, there's no way to say if there was or there wasn't. The establishment of days wasn't
the
there.
fact that it was established can lead us to believe that it wasn't.
The establishment of, if we say the establishment of time or the idea of time began when man showed up, then yes. But we don't have any proof that it did or didn't.
Right. I wouldn't even have that, because that's a debatable conversation. The fact that
in our existence,
He made the moon, He made the sun, He made the this, He made the that, and He took this day and said, set apart, sacred, different from the others, forever. Well, not forever.
Well, just sacred. Just at this point, sacred for the others.
Right.
No, it's funny. We were alluding to that the other day, and I was thinking along those same lines. Cause I constantly just go back and I read and challenge myself to are you really doing what you're supposed to do? Are you really listening and reading and all that kind of stuff? And there's a lot of different things I waffle on when I read.
Okay.
there are two things I've never waffled on, and it was the Sabbath and Jesus being raised from the dead. And like those are like the two things that are like for me are solidified. Like I don't know what you can give me because I haven't seen anything different.
Yeah. Why Jesus raised him from the dead?
Because he did. It was prophesied. However many years before. You go through his life. He talks about it happening, and then it happens. And so between that and the Sabbath, like, I don't know what else you need.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's nothing. I've never understood. I've seen verses, but I've never understood how we got there because it wasn't necessarily anything given to Israel.
Yeah. The command itself said, remember.
Correct.
Remember what was already done.
So, I guess, can I ask, if somebody out there can give me a reason or share with us why, or if it's changed or
why did he say remember?
No, why has there been, because people who now acknowledge the seventh day are in the minority, right?
Right.
So why, even amongst Christians, why is Sunday considered holier than Saturday? I'm not even gonna say like, is it considered holier than Saturday?
I don't know if it's considered holier, at least from the Sunday worshippers that I know.
You have at least 5 positions on Sabbath.
Right.
You have those who believe that the significance of the 7th day was transferred wholly to Sunday.
How?
They provide support for it. I can't give you that right this second, but I do have that documented.
Okay.
You have
biblically.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no.
Okay.
They retroactively apply text.
I don't know what that means.
It means they read a text and take what's happening now and add the meaning of what's happening now onto the text.
Okay.
But the text at that time could not have meant that.
Got you. Okay.
Right? So you have people who do believe that the significance of Saturday was the Sabbath has been transferred wholly and significantly to Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You do have those who disagree with that and say, no, that's not exactly right. Saturday is the Sabbath, but Sunday is also a holy day and has its own significance.
Because of, I've always heard because Jesus rose.
Because of Jesus rising.
Okay.
And then you have those who believe that the 10 Commandments are done away with, right? Nailed to the cross or whatever, so that there's no mandate or imperative to keep the Sabbath. And then you have those people who believe that not all the 10 Commandments are done away with, just the Sabbath commandment.
Which I don't understand that one.
And then you have those who believe in but they also believe in the importance of a 1 in 7 cycle rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
But then you could pretty much choose whichever day is
and so I guess
is significant for you.
I guess my thing is that if I were going to believe something, it would probably be that the 1 in 7 day cycle. That would make more sense here than any of the others.
And that one is a growing one currently right now, due to, particularly in America where we have this ongoing 24/7 lifestyle where people are being burnt out and whatnot. The idea of Sabbath or cycled rest is gaining traction and is a very big idea now. And so more and more people are appealing to the idea and the principle of it, but leaving the interpretation of an application of it to the individual.
So Genesis 2:1 says, "Thus the heavens and earth were finished, and all the hosts of them." So I'm trying to think of it from someone else's perspective. And on the 7th day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. This is amplified
Mm-hmm.
version. And then God blessed or spoke good of the seventh day and set it apart as his own, and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all his work which he had created and done.
Yeah, that was one that stood out to me this time. It was part of the creation activity.
So is there an argument that it was just that day and not the seventh day perpetually?
I might have to go and look that up. I did not see that in my reading.
What's Hebrews 4, 9, and 10 say? Because that's what the reference back to.
So then, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also entered from his work, has also rested from his work as God did from his. What I got from that is
God's rest also has ceased.
What God did was considered work.
Mm-hmm.
And probably one of the few times that we see him saying, I'm working and rested. And once we were cast to sin, we were supposed to work.
No, we was working before
We were
that.
working before then.
2:15.
Well, we were laboring after sin, I guess.
Right.
No, you were laboring.
Nah,
after
player. Stupid. Silly. And I'm guessing the example is he worked and rested. You work and rested, which is where Hebrews is coming in to say there remains a Sabbath rest of the people of God. For whoever has entered his rest is also rested from his work as he rested.
Right. Well, even the business people are seeing the value in that kind of a
And
rest.
science is saying that it's necessary to
Right.
rest in that 24 hours.
So, and I guess that's the thing. So, but it's bigger than that.
It is bigger than that.
So, because I hear people talk about the rest, and I get the rest, but to hallow something or to make it holy, is bigger than I'm just not going to work on that day.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, the word there is to set apart.
You see Ron's comment? Okay.
I'm about to read it. Yes. So yes, to Ron's point,
What's his point?
he was commenting on the change from Saturday to Sunday, and that happened over time for a number of various number of factors, but was kind of solidified by Constantine, and then it became the norm. It was one way of distinguishing Christians from Jews, because Jews were under persecution, so they're trying to distinguish themselves. It was to align with the pagan thing to bring unity between the people under his rule. There was a number of factors that influenced it. But over time that became the norm, and that's what people inherited. And then retroactively, people applied scripture to it. But after it became the norm. That's a whole history study that we're not necessarily going to do tonight.
Sure.
I guess my why I lingered on it was, if that is established that the day was set apart, let's even take this out, the seventh day
Yeah.
was set apart as holy from the beginning, at what point does it lose its significance and holiness? And I'm wondering how come in all the times I've heard conversations about the Sabbath, nobody's ever asked that question. And I've never heard a rebuttal where anybody said, well, it didn't, or it did, or at what point does the significance disappear? That setting it apart. Because a lot of the argument is based on the Ten Commandments. Well, the Ten Commandments,
Sight, remember.
the Ten Commandments only says remember.
Correct.
Doesn't command you to keep it. Remember, it says remember it to keep it as it already has been established to be.
Correct.
So it's not like a new thing that was introduced to the people. They might have been reminded of the fact that hey,
Well,
I've already set this
with
thing up.
remember, there has to be some type. I mean, it's
They were
reminding.
also with the Egyptians for a very long time.
Right. So
Yeah.
So you understand how they get to the point, how God gets to the
Right.
point of remember.
Yeah, makes sense.
But even if you don't, even if you did not know that this thing was set apart, it's saying now to remember to keep this thing that is already set apart. It's like, so let's say you didn't know that the speed limit on the street is 35, and you've been speeding up and down the street, and then we became friends, and I say, you know, remember when you're passing down the street, there's a speed trap camera that you didn't know was there before. But I'm telling you in the future to keep that in mind. Even if I'm introducing it to you, that speed camera has been there. And I'm just bringing it to your attention for you to acknowledge.
So it was introduced at creation, the end of creation. It's not mentioned again until...
Correct.
It's not mentioned again by God, or
It's not mentioned again in the Bible.
It's the Bible is silent about it till the Jews
until
come out of
until
the children of Israel
Exodus
come out.
20.
No, not Exodus 20. It's a little bit before that. I think it's Exodus 16.
16? Okay.
When they do come out of the when they come out of Egypt and they're in the thing and he sends manna the first time.
Correct.
That's the first time that
That's
you
the
hear
first
about the
time.
Sabbath. And that's
pre-Ten Commandments.
pre-Ten Commandments.
Correct.
Yeah. But even if that's the case, it still doesn't undermine the significance of the day from the beginning. Let's say nobody kept it and everybody was speeding out there. It's still significant.
Well,
It's still holy. The day is still holy.
my question is, the day's holy. Let me ask this: is it significant?
Well, is it significant? Is it significant to us?
It's only mentioned it's mentioned very few times in the Bible,
Right.
right? It's mentioned at creation, not mentioned again until you're saying Exodus 15, 16, wherever. It's not mentioned again. Then it's talked about again in 20, and then, periodically as you go through that, it's talked about again. What is it? Isaiah, Jeremiah, whatever it was. I think it's Jeremiah. And then
It's actually talked about more often now because it's built into the life of the people post.
correct those.
Post.
But then you get into the New Testament, and it's not talked about as often.
So here's the question: does
So-
the frequency of conversation determine its significance?
Considering that God Himself made man in His image and then made the day holy. Like, that's the part that's sticking with me. I know for a lot of people, maybe even those listening, like, why is this an issue? It's just, for me, this is resonating right now. That the thing was made holy up front. Why is there so much divide about it if that is a fact?
It's kind of like you tell Julian in the beginning, "I'm your dad." You need to tell him every year. If you don't repeat it enough times, does that not make him your father? I mean, that
But
make him
does
your
it
son?
but does it lose its significance?
No, because when I'm ready to beat you, you understand who you belong to. I done set this already, you know. I said that this is the standard. And I said, don't forget that I'm your dad. So if you slip up, boop, 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 don't be surprised what comes your way because I've already set the
So
standard.
I'm not gonna minimize the significance of God establishing it, because I think it's self-explanatory. Like, He did it at the very beginning of the Bible. In the Bible at time. However, with your example, 5 generations from now, how significant is it that Jared was Julian's father?
It depends on the role that Jared played.
That's what I'm saying.
So, like, if,
how significant is that?
it depends. So
Because very, very rarely, even in our society now, is it significant what my great 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 grandfather did.
But if you look at numbers, or when we start going into history, in that day and age, there is significance in genealogy. There is significance in what an older person did or what was established. So for those people, yes, it is significant. We, however, live in a society that my generation determines my rules. And whatever culture is of my time is what I am governed by. We don't know monarchy. We don't know any of that stuff.
Sure.
So, yes, we were never raised to hold on to those type of things. But from a biblical standpoint, anyone during that time is well aware of the significance of what the fathers and forefathers and the Creator says.
It's like asking, is it significant that man was created in the image of God? Is that significant?
Depends on who you ask. It depends on God's role in your life.
It's significant if someone's really trying to get down and narrow down purpose.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It depends on his role in your life.
Oh, Sabbath is getting down for purpose.
The same guy who was intentional about saying, I'm making you in my image. I'm giving you all these things to support your life. And the very last thing I do in that process is say, you see this day right here? This day is different from all the others. In all the things that he's chosen to do, how is that significant? Or is it significant? That he chose to do that in the creation process, to me is a big deal.
But not only that, I could count.
That makes sense.
On another argument is, why do we hold on to some things of God but not others?
Like what?
Ask and you shall receive. Taken out of context in every way, shape, or form. Mentioned once. Most popular thing, you give me the desires of my heart. The most random things that flies out, we hold on to those like, yeah, I like that one right there.
Yes. Because we suck. We're selfish. And I think that's the answer to the other question, is that, why is it insignificant, or why, it's because we're selfish. Like,
if it benefits us, we hold on to it. If it don't, it's cool.
That was just a thought that came to me as I was reading, starting over again.
So where does it leave you?
It leaves me with, since he made the day holy, I need to be more intentional about making sure I treat it as such. Forget, the religion thing and the denomination thing. This is all a me and God thing.
Correct.
He established when he created mankind that I was made in his image, and I have that understanding and helping me guide and order my life, particularly since Jesus comes to try and restore all things and bring us back to that place. He also established from the beginning that this day is of significance, this time period. And so now I have some difficult choices to make, because I live in a community where that time is not treated as sacred and it's abused. So I have to decide whether I participate in the community.
So do you mind if we dig in a little bit?
Sure.
So what does that, and I'm not looking for specifics as far as but what does that look like? Like the fact that he separated it out from all the other 6 days.
He separated it out and he did something.
Rested.
So what does that what does that look like? So, he slept. What is rested? He did what? Like what is rested and hallowed?
All right, well, let's go to the verse that talks about it, because
Okay.
I think I believe that our writer was intentional about the way he described it, because it almost seems repetitive in the way that he says this, right? He says, by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work.
That he had done.
Which is the work that he was doing.
Right.
Right.
Not necessarily work.
No.
Work he was doing.
Correct.
Okay.
And it didn't say he didn't do anything. It just said he was no longer doing that.
Correct.
Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy or sacred or set apart, because that's what that word means. And he made it like that because, my Bible says, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Then he set me in his image to work.
So, based upon this, the rest is from whatever work we were doing the previous 6 days.
Correct. And if
Not
you
necessarily from work.
well, yes. Depending on how you define work, I could agree with that. I'm going to assume we are using the same definition for work. Anything that is active. How are you defining work?
When you say active, I mean, there are people that sit at their desk
They're still actively doing something.
thinking.
Pushing the buttons on the keyboard.
So, okay, so actively not pushing buttons on the keyboard for a particular reason. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like,
So let's go.
how does someone today define and get to that point to understand what work is?
So let's go back to what he does with the day. He sets it apart as different from the other 6.
Mm-hmm. So what did he do the other 6?
Created.
He created.
I'm not creating on this day. And I'm making sure you realize that
And
I'm
his
not
creation
creating.
wasn't like outside of the 6th day. His creation was just talking, speaking. Like he spoke these things into existence. The only time he actually created with his, like physically created with his hands, was when he formed man. Yes, no?
Yes.
That's what
But this will sound a little heretical. And I'm willing to do that because that's my role on the couch. You know, if I give orders to do something
correct.
You're a general. You give orders.
You
and,
were.
and I'm overseeing the work to make sure it's done,
Yeah.
right, then I could be referred to as speaking it into an existence.
Oh, I wasn't thinking you were going there.
I didn't either. I thought he was going to stop.
Yeah.
That was the period. That's what the heresy comes in. I see.
So let me ask you. So just that I make sure that I understand you as a heretic. So you are saying,
I'm suggesting, I'm not saying.
you are suggesting that he was telling others.
I'm saying that that's also a legitimately plausible reading.
Angels could possibly be executing against my command.
That's a legitimate potential, possibly inline reading
Why would
of the
you even
text.
say that?
If we haven't thought about it in the last 4
Yeah,
years.
like, why would you even introduce that thought? I'm gonna have my kids up all night tonight. All right, I'm leaving that here.
Right, let's
No, you're not.
I'm not. But for right now, I have to because I can't.
Did they lock the door?
No.
No, okay. Come in. What up?
Hey,
Hey,
Are you just in time for the heresy?
For what?
Jared's a heretic by
Oh my
himself.
god. So did you read in the Bible where when God was speaking the world into existence and during creation, that people were actually doing the work for him?
It was actually Gabriel and Michael.
Yeah. That's where we are. Alright, so I'm leaving that for now. So going back to the work.
Right.
So that was work. Whether you're commanding, whether you're doing
Whether just with your voice.
with your voice, whatever.
Can you see?
That's work. So whatever you were doing for those 6 days, we're now on the 7th day not doing that.
Correct.
Boom.
Well, if you go to Exodus 20, you see that that's also a fair understanding of what's happening. Because the instruction in Exodus 20, I know we're not there yet for the year, is don't do the stuff you was doing for the last 6 days.
Whatever that was.
Yeah, so it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
6 days. Shall
For 6 days you will labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it you shall not do any work. You and everybody living with you.
And everybody who's serving you and anybody who under your
And the
cover.
reason for that is in 6 days, the Lord made heavens and earth and he did his work. And he rested on the 7th day.
Figure out how to do yours and rest.
So figure out how to do your work. Yeah. And rest likewise. So it's a setting apart of the day and it's a treating of the day to be different from what I do.
Yes,
Yes,
but
right.
it goes a little deeper than that because, like, when you go into here, in the Amplified, verse 11, in parenthesis, it says, set it apart for his purposes.
Right.
Which
Right.
means what?
That's what holy means. To set apart for
For his purpose.
a specific purpose, yes.
Which means what? He set it apart for his purpose. Which was what?
To rest.
To rest from doing what he was doing before.
Correct.
Holy, dedicated, devoted to the service of God.
Well, it's more than just holy. It's kadosh is the name is the word, which has its own meaning, which is
K-A-D-O-Q.
Q A-D-O-S-H.
Can you? I don't even know. I don't think my Google picks that up.
If you go to King James Bible Dictionary and pull up the verse, you'll actually see it there. I have it in another book up there. That's all.
Oh shoot. It's a song by the artist Behemoth from the album The Satanist.
You guys are killing me today. Got heresy and satanic.
In the biblical Hebrew, kadosh and kadesh are two differently grammatical forms of the same word, to be holy. The perfect and the participle. That is kind of ironic.
So say that one more time.
Sorry.
In the biblical Hebrew, kadesh and kadash, are two different grammatical forms of the same verb, to be holy. The perfect and the participle.
That was just a grammar thing.
As in to sanctify or sanctify.
How does God make something holy?
It says a primary root, to be clean, appoint, bid, consecrate, dedicate, defile, hallow, keep holy, keep, prepare, proclaim, purify, sanctify, or holy.
Yeah, so you have to understand what the word. Yeah. So I'm gonna read this little thing from a book called The Sabbath by a guy named Abraham Joshua Heschel. He said one of the most distinguished words in the Bible is the word kadosh, holy, a word which more than any other is representative of the mystery and majesty of the divine. Now, what was the first holy object of the history in the world? Was it a mountain? Was it an altar? It is indeed a unique occasion at which the distinguished word kadosh is used for the first time in the book of Genesis at the end of the story of creation. How extremely significant is the fact that it is applied to time, and the Lord blessed the seventh day and made it holy. There is no reference in the creation to any other object in space that would be endowed with the quality of holiness. This is a radical departure from accustomed religious thinking. The mythical mind would expect that after heaven and earth is established, God would create a holy place, a holy mountain, or a holy spring whereupon a sanctuary is to be established. Yet it seems as if to the Bible it is the holiness in time, the Sabbath, which comes first. When history began, there is only one holiness in the world, the holiness of time. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he goes into a little bit more about it.
So based upon this conversation, the Sabbath seems a little weird, or the seventh day seems a little weird, right? In that it's defined, but yet even in that definition of what it is, it's very mysterious. Like there's like I don't. What does holy mean when you're talking about this day?
So
it's very open-ended in that it can mean. It's almost very personal.
You think so?
I don't think so. I think you could make it personal if you really want to defend it. Or defend how you want to deal with it.
Well, and I go back to, Exodus 20 verse 11, is that that's why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it, or set it apart for his purposes.
Right.
Like, if it's hallowed or set apart for his purposes,
what are his purposes?
What are his purposes?
Well, we know they're not
And
yours.
what were his purposes? What were his purposes on that day? On that seventh day, when he set it apart.
On that seventh day, based on what Genesis 2 says, is to rest.
Hold on a second.
What does rest look like? Is saying he didn't do what he did the last 6 days. What did he do the last 6 days?
That's what I'm saying. Like it's
work.
I mean,
He created.
He created.
So what he did not do on the seventh day was create. What else was there for him to do? We don't know. But we knew his job when he started this whole day thing
was create.
And I'm not doing it today. So
yeah, I'm gonna read this here for you. Yeah. I'm gonna start from here.
Yeah.
Like
To frame his discussion, Heschel establishes the difference and the interrelation between. I'm gonna go down. Heschel's emphasis on the word kadosh stood out to me because I encountered it previously in this book here, The Mission of God's People, by Christopher Wright. Wright says, at the heart, the word holy in Hebrew, kadosh, means different or distinctive. Something or someone is holy when it gets set apart for a distinct purpose in relation to God, and then kept separate for that purpose. So he made the time holy, and then he made the people holy. The people of Israel are holy because they're set apart for a specific purpose. In context, Wright was making the point that the Israelites were set apart to be holy and distinct from the nations. God had set apart Israel for himself. It was God's initiative and choice. It would appear that when God refers to something or someone as holy or sanctified, it simply means those whom God has identified as his own. Heschel seems to be making the same point about the Sabbath. God at creation set apart the seventh day for himself. By blessing it and making it holy, he made it distinct from all other days, as distinct as Israel was to be from the other nations. It was not just another day like the others. It is the day God chose to sanctify on his own initiative for his own purposes. Just as the Israelites were God's chosen people, it reveals that the seventh day is God's chosen day. Right. And the 10th commandment doesn't, the fourth commandment doesn't reveal what those purposes are?
No.
The fourth commandment?
Yes.
It just tells you to the point. I think so. I think it was established, and I think it makes sense that he rested from his work, which is what the fourth commandment's telling us.
Mm-hmm.
It's rested from his work,
Right.
right? And therefore, because you're resting from your work, and because God made this holy, then don't have your servants working, don't have and it goes on to that whole thing, right? So I think that's very clear. What's not clear is at the end what his purposes are, in a way to mimic. So if we're saying that this was established here,
Okay.
back at creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that he rested. When you read Exodus 20 verse 11, especially, and it goes on to talk about holy or hallowed, what did he do that was his purposes, for his purposes, other than rest?
And why rest can't be it?
Huh?
Why resting can't be it?
Because resting, based upon our conversation, wasn't necessarily the act of sleep or whatever. It was the act of stopping what you were doing.
Yes, it's a ceasing word.
It's a
Yes.
ceasing word. Correct.
So why can't it just be cease?
Why can't that be the purpose?
To cease what you were doing.
Right.
Right.
Which means what?
Stop it.
You can do other things? That's what, no, I'm saying, no,
That would make sense to me.
no, but the absent, you can't just be still.
No.
Like, that's not
No,
what he's
but
asking
I
you to
don't think-
do.
I don't
So
think-
I'm saying, so what is it that we're doing? So, for instance,
Well, let's go to Exodus 16.
if I'm not working,
Right.
right? I've worked all week for 6 days.
What are
Right.
you doing?
I'm now going to rest from that work
Right.
and do something that I didn't do those 6 days,
Possibly.
like play golf.
Could be.
Perhaps.
But here's
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, what is it? Is it things that I do? Like, is it just fulfilling am I just fulfilling the request or the command by just not doing what I was doing those previous 6 days?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
and
That's actually a good question.
to add on to that question, now that Kenrick has gone there, since the vague nature of it, why does it make people so uncomfortable when I switch what I'm doing from what I was doing to something else, but it's just not in line with what they think I should do?
So that's where I'm getting. That's why I was saying that was my point. That you articulate much better than I did. That was my point about it being this day being defined, because it's defined by not doing what you were doing the previous 6 days. However, it's open ended because it could be left at this point. It's left to interpretation, right?
Of the alternatives.
Of the alternatives,
Right.
correct? Not the because I mean, all I gotta do is just go back and say, okay, I did these the 6 days. I'm not doing that. I'm resting from that because that's what he did. Now what do I do?
Now what?
And now there's still a litany of things I can do that
That I just didn't do.
I
all
just
week.
didn't do the previous week because that was work.
Not. It was just the work of the week.
The work of the week.
Now, if you're thinking about it in terms of the significance of the work or the time, that will also make a difference. Because if the time itself is what's sacred and not the activity that happens during the time, it now begs the question of,
But the time was made sacred because of the activity or lack thereof. Like he didn't make the day hallowed without the reason why the day was hallowed is because it was like I rested on it and I stopped doing what I was doing, and because I stopped doing what I was doing, now this day is hallowed.
Correct.
Not that it was hallowed before.
Correct.
And then he just was like, okay, I'm not going to do anything on this day. Like, it was made hallowed because of
The cessation.
the cessation of work. And not the sensation of work, but the cessation.
Let's read Exodus 16.
Is that a germ that you're suffering from?
Just one. Just one pesky germ.
That just kind of came upon you over the last hour.
There's a
16.
lot of germs going around.
16
Whatever.
from...
Is anybody commenting?
No.
No one?
No,
Silence.
Marcella commented.
Okay, yeah, she did. She did add Isaiah chapter 58. But
So,
before we get to that, let's read 16. Where God brings it in to the people for the first time. And then we'll jump to Isaiah 58.
I didn't want to jump to Isaiah because then,
Yeah,
because we're not.
Yeah.
But
But let's,
yeah.
let's process through.
I hear you.
Exodus 16. Let's go from verse.
Are you turning it?
Let's go from 11.
You know, because this is a Bible-filling house.
The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites.
She coming right outside.
Oh, okay. I've heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is this? For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, no one is to keep any of it till morning. However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it till morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, this is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning. So they saved it until morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. Eat it today, the Lord Moses said, because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any. Nevertheless, some people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out. So the people rested on the 7th day.
So that.
That just. They didn't say don't do nothing else. He said don't
So-
pick the don't pick the manna.
Yeah,
No, he was like, you're not to go out.
And pick the
Well,
manna.
go out and pick the manna or go out of your tent.
Don't go out and pick the manna.
Go out of your tent to collect the manna.
You can still go out your tent and be like, yo, what up, Ivan? What up, Sharika? What's good? But you can't get the manna. There's no manna for you to get. You went out with the intention of getting the manna.
You also went out with the intention of providing for self,
Correct.
for being a creator.
Correct.
You went out with creator.
Mentality.
So you can go out.
Yeah, you go out to your tent.
You can't just create.
No, you disobeyed what I told you to do. I told you ain't gonna be none out there. Collect enough for today and tomorrow.
Allow me to provide for you.
You do whatever else you want to do. Go bathe, go do whatever you want to do. But collect enough for today and tomorrow because that's what I got for you. What we not doing is collecting today. because that's what I said. So you still went out there and disobeyed.
But it's a little bit more than there is what I said, but it's a little bit more than that. It's also allow me to be your provider.
Correct. Well, the whole exercise was, don't worry about tomorrow. I got you.
Right, but if you're talking about, well, I mean, of course, that is the exercise, but from the situation of the Sabbath and
Correct.
the work and not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, so, alright, so you don't do what you did the previous 6 days. You don't provide for yourself
Yes.
on that day.
Allow me to give you rest.
I wrestle with provide for yourself on that day because it can be narrowly interpreted
As
and taken advantage of.
As
How?
in you're king for every other day except for this day?
So,
In that sense?
no, it's just I know I'm evaluating, is this a provision for self? And if it's not a provision for self, is it acceptable? And then am I now filtering it through, is this a provision for self activity? Take, for example, the blurred line of do we have choir practice on Sabbath or not? It's not technically a self-provision thing. And it becomes very difficult to judge that as whether I'm providing for self or not.
so
I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be done. I'm just saying,
Sure.
using that as an example, it becomes difficult to process.
I got
through
you.
that definition.
Which is goes back to the statement I made a few minutes ago. And we went out last night and we were talking with some guys and we were kind of going back and forth. And I was like, one of the things, and forgive me before I, like,
Are
one
you
of
going
the
to join me
things.
on the hit side?
No. I'm never going there. But one of the things, that once again, I don't know if I said it last time, that frustrates me about organized religion is that it doesn't give you the space, right? And so, to your point, like, I really see God giving you space to figure this out and for it to be very specific to what this relationship is, as opposed to things you can't do. You're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do this. He's been very clear. This is what you're not supposed to do. Rest from this. And it's whatever you were doing. Right? Don't gather. Right? Provide. I know you were pushed back a little bit, but no provide. There's still a lot of things out there after that.
Correct.
Right? And so there's a lot of room for you to figure this out. Whereas religion, you can't really.
Now that's the box.
Well, you have to box it in because you can't have everybody just doing all kinds of different things because you lose who you are and the significance of what it is that you're trying to communicate. That branding or whatever you're doing.
So I'm gonna pause here.
Yes.
You've never met Lorraine before.
No.
Was that rubbing your feet? Sorry. It's not that kind of video or. Because you saw her eyes. Like,
So
I'm sorry.
This is Kendrick.
Nice to meet you.
Jewel, it was a mistake.
so everyone online and even Kendrick, this is Lorraine.
This is Lorraine who's online?
Yeah.
Okay.
who's been keeping our t-shirt record.
Ah, that's right. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
So, welcome. Glad to have you join us. So,
So you knew I was
Marcella
gonna
asked
take
Kendrick. So it's not about what we do, but what we are told not to do.
Both.
Because over time, just how we always talk about when you level up in your relationships, it becomes more than just the 10 Commandments. It becomes more than just whatever. God may say, listen, Jared, no more curry. Right? which hurts. It hurts, bro. But it's
I don't know what God would do.
I don't know. I can't imagine that God would ever do something like that.
You said he's a loving.
At the end of the day, what we're told not to do is, God may say, let's say you pick golf. I won't do that. Let's say you pick the horses. Let's say you pick dealing with horses, right?
Yeah.
And God could easily say, "Oh, Cameron, that's not what I want you to do today."
For me.
And for you, but Jewel and
Yes, we've had
y'all can go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So it is about that. Like there is that room, and we know that room exists. There's just certain things I'm not supposed to do, and it's okay. There's certain vices. Nah, you ain't gonna survive that. Go ahead, Jared, do your thing. But I think it starts from the stage 0. Don't do that. Experiment, and as we grow, I'll tell you what else doesn't get done.
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
Because it becomes a creation activity for me.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes people uncomfortable.
Yes, because
Or it becomes a creation activity for us. Sometimes, depending on if we're in community.
correct. But to your point, it does make people uncomfortable.
Sorry, we're talking about the Sabbath.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm yeah.
catching up.
You want to
I'm
catch?
catching up.
You want to
I'm
catch her up?
Look, it's okay.
No, it's way
Keep
too
going.
far down.
Keep going.
All
Just
right.
keep going.
But it does make people uncomfortable because it's easier to define things, right? And and it's easier to stay within the margins. We teach our kids to stay within the lines when they color and all that kind of stuff because outside the lines is wrong and ugly, based upon just whoever dictated the picture.
Correct.
The problem is that the person who dictated this picture was very specific in saying, cease from your work here and rest. Period. What happens after that? Is it defined?
But nothing else.
No.
Other things aren't defined either. I mean, he makes it very clear, even to the rich young ruler. I've been following the laws from day
So
one.
where
I've
do
been
the
coloring
definition-
in the lines.
So
this
where
whole
do
time.
where do definitions come from then? How have we defined certain things?
I believe similar.
Or why?
Similar to.
Shared
The-
understanding is what definitions. Shared understanding generates definitions.
Shared understanding.
And established expectation.
Yeah, it's how that's
And
that's
that's
beautiful.
different within
I like
different
that.
groups,
That's a good one. I'm keeping that.
You can have it. Like, we're setting expectation here. This is what I expect. I can't tell you everything, but I know what we not gonna do are these.
This thing, yeah.
As we grow and get to know each other, you're gonna know, and I don't like that either, and I don't like. But these are the deal breakers. Start here.
And that definition was given to people who didn't know better. The babies coming in. That's when you had to define those definitions.
And then he gets upset at them in Deuteronomy when he's like, yo, I don't really care about these rules like this. The way you guys are holding on to these, that wasn't its purpose. It was to remind you that, hey, I don't like these things, but not for you to just all of a sudden be like, there's no relationship, I'm just going to keep doing this.
You see that with Jesus too.
Yeah.
When Jesus comes to upset their understanding and their expectations on what this thing is supposed to be. Yeah, you see that there too. Daryl asks a question. Well, he says, the interesting thing is that in both instances, God is the one that rests on the Sabbath. God said, I'm not going to send any man on the 7th day, so prep for that day before.
Good job, D. I didn't even think about that.
Tell me
That
what
he
says.
that he stayed he stayed consistent with his
He's
own like
resting too. I ain't working for y'all. Y'all better figure it out.
no, but that's the thing. Like I've never thought about God resting.
That's what it says.
No, I know it's what it says.
What if you get
But
an
like,
accident?
but
God
when
rest.
we're praying and doing all these things and like
I told you that.
there's actually some things he's not doing on Saturday,
Oh,
on the 7th day.
right,
Hey.
right. He's not.
That's what he said. That's what Daryl.
He's not sending the man.
He's not sending the man. He's resting.
Yeah.
He's not doing the things that he was doing the previous 6
thought about
days.
that either.
I never thought. Yo, Daryl.
Mind blown.
he does then ask the question.
So should we not expect certain things on Saturday,
Make
on
sure
the
you
seventh
did
day?
it the sixth.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you actually should.
Don't do things you like during the week. Wait till Saturday.
Is that why some people get paid on Friday? I don't know. I'm
Stupid. Darren goes on to ask, do you get the idea that God is just introducing to the Sabbath, or do they know about the Sabbath from before?
no.
Definitely know about it. They definitely know about it.
No, they don't.
They definitely know about it.
They don't know about it.
All right,
The-
that's
the
too
Israelites?
It's impossible.
The Israelites?
Impossible.
Fact.
400 years?
They know about it.
They don't know.
You know why they know about it? Because they knew about the God. And they understood it. They said that he had betrayed them. They knew who he was and they knew what he stood for.
They
Whether
knew
or not
the
he
Sabbath.
was holding up his side of the deal, they were aware.
No one else knew about the Sabbath.
Bro, my
After-
mother don't
after
ever
things-
tell me
I didn't-
remember
No one
unless
didn't know
I
about the
didn't-
Sabbath.
Exactly.
My mother
Did
doesn't
Noah
tell me.
rest
My
on-
mother doesn't
from-
tell me
from building the
remember
ark on the
unless
Sabbath?
he told me before. He told me before.
Did Noah rest by building the ark on the Sabbath?
Noah doesn't
So,
have
let
to
me ask you this.
necessarily mention the Sabbath.
Huh?
Remember Jared, your daddy? Bro, I told you that when he came out the womb.
So
I
you
don't need to
can't-
keep saying it.
So you don't
ever
know.
watch a movie and you don't ever see anybody go to the toilet?
But they
No,
peed.
they
They peed.
Jack
But
Bauer never
they've
did.
been out there for 6 months, right?
They peed.
Do they go to the toilet?
They peed.
Did anybody
So
go to the
number
toilet?
one-
You didn't see them go to the toilet in the whole
Number
movie.
one,
They
that's
they
a,
pee?
that's a very poor
They
example.
peed though. They peed.
Amy, oh, let me do this one. So I watched The Walking Dead, right?
Ugh.
And in that show, these people are running from place to place overnighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know they have women in the group.
Period.
scam.
Come. I'm an amphibian. Nobody mentions it though.
What they doing? What they doing for that time of the month? All of them.
If you're believing in the walking of the dead, then
My
you
point-
don't have to believe in period.
My point
Like,
is,
it's all like everything's up.
it's not
Like,
included. It's not included in the story unless it's,
It's
a
not
part of the
needed.
but it
story.
doesn't
It's not
necessarily mean that they
needed.
knew it.
It's not needed in the storyline right now.
So I gotta say that.
So you're
I
saying that
didn't
no
think-
one in 24 had a bladder infection? It's possible
What
they
we're
did.
saying is you may have held it for 5 hours. 24, they went to the bathroom, bro. They went to the bathroom. Jack went to the bathroom. Whether he wanted to
He
tell you he
did go to
did,
the
he
bathroom.
went to the bathroom.
He does now because he's president.
all one day, no.
No.
It's not like all one day.
Yeah, but
The
you-
season
you've
is one day,
gone-
but he went to the bathroom.
But he doesn't drink a lot of water on the show either. But what I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is, I hear what you're saying. That doesn't mean that they knew.
But that also doesn't
Remember,
mean that they didn't know.
remember
But
is a
didn't
very important word.
But remember, going back to what Jared, how he explained
Yo, even
the.
Mufasa said, remember to Simba, son. It was a reminder. I said this to you before.
Really?
Yes.
Lion King?
We do an example.
Oh my god.
Y'all picking
But
all the
that
shows
remember,
today.
I remember may not necessarily mean
I said it before.
remember what happened before. It
What
could,
I
it could mean
mean is-
continue to remember.
No, what I mean is, however, when you use the
can't
word
reference
remember, it is for you to have something gets clicked in your head. I've heard this,
There should be a
something
reference
similar.
point.
There's a reference
Yeah,
point.
there's a
Yeah,
reference
the
point.
reference.
No,
Yeah.
but the reference point doesn't necessarily have to be with you. The
No, it could be
reference
somebody
point,
else.
the reference point could have been before you, and he's just saying, "Remember."
Going
But
forward,
did-
please remember.
Going forward, please remember.
No.
But didn't back
No?
then,
No,
So you're saying just it can't,
no.
just impossible.
What I'm saying is for these people and how they held on to the words of their fathers and their forefathers and the scribes and all this stuff. This is not the first time that they've been introduced to the Sabbath of the Lord their God.
but didn't back then they pass down all the different things that happened? That's how they
That's how they
pass
do
Correct.
it.
history.
But
Yeah.
then I
Correct.
feel like it's
But-
easy for it to get lost in
Yeah.
translation because they didn't
But that's
know.
probably why the
They'd
Sabbath-
heard of the God of their fathers, but they didn't know God
At
personally.
some point, these are slaves.
Correct.
They're working
Right,
all of the time.
right, and they all
You
have
are going.
choice.
You work all the time,
It
and
doesn't
you
mean
tell me
you
what
never
day it is.
heard of the
Yeah.
Sabbath.
But I'm saying,
You're not
no.
allowed to hold
Over
it. But
400.
just
over
because
four,
I'm
we're
not
talking
allowed
about
to
20 years.
just because I'm not allowed to maintain it doesn't mean I've never heard of it.
No,
That's a long
I'm
time,
not.
though.
I'm not saying over. I'm saying over 4.
Yo, they were still talking about
100
Joseph. They were
years.
still talking about Joseph and how they got here.
That's different.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's
It's
not.
How
the
is it
same.
not
It's the same
different?
story
Same
of how we
history,
got
yeah.
here. They
He
went
wasn't
back
even
to my
keeping
man's
the Sabbath.
bones. They went back for my
Exactly.
man's bones. They hold on to this stuff. That is it's not even bones. It's just dirt at this point. Yo, let me go get Joseph real quick. He brought us here. Let's go. Like you.
So here's my question, right? Because I'm kind of with Kenrick on this, where I don't.
Because you're right.
Folks.
I don't see that they had, hey, here's the foundation of how we operating before they got taken out of Egypt. I think that their ancestors kind of had a way. They didn't really have the rules. I don't think Abraham had the rules. I think he kind of moved when God said move, he moved, and that's why it was accounted to him and all the other good stuff. But I feel like they kind of lost.
Yeah, the space.
Yes, but they kind of, over the 400 years, it's kind of just like, okay, I know our ancestors used to talk about this God, but I don't really know who that is. And I don't really know, like, I'm over here getting mashed up and getting pushed into labor 7 days a week. Like,
And if you really existed, why are we still here?
I don't think they knew God personally. And
No,
so
I never said they knew personally.
No, not to that.
So
I'm just saying. But I think when God took them out of Egypt, he had to be like, okay, let me introduce myself to you.
Before,
So you understand
he
that
got
we're
an
arguing
introduction.
something that none of us can
Of
prove,
course.
right?
But we got
Okay.
an introduction before that because they were familiar with this God. Because for me to leave with Moses, this must be the power that my father's father was talking about. This homie right here is running Pharaoh. So this must be who we knew, who hasn't been paying us mind for 400 years. And we were told we gotta leave, so we gotta go.
Don't argue with that. Not arguing with that.
But what I'm saying is, how is it then impossible if they remember that God that wasn't mentioned somewhere down the line?
So,
they don't know him per se.
So I'm gonna say that's a possibility.
And I will co-sign and say that the actual command says because of what God did from before, and that thing that you know that he did from before. Now you may not have a full appreciation of how that impacts you right here and right now, but at least you're aware of the fact that he rested on the seventh day, because that is the reference point for the current command. So at least from that point there was a reference, awareness, because they do remember creation story at least.
And they remember what he did for them, the old people.
No one can prove it. We're arguing.
Bro,
But
Fair enough.
You just said it's possible.
Listen,
Can we
I
go to
know
Isaiah
I'm right,
58?
and I can't prove it.
Can we go to Isaiah 58 to kind of talk about what that open space is like?
Yep.
That open space. Now we have the don't do, so what do we do?
Isaiah 58, what verse?
It's close to the end.
It's only 14.
It's 13.
Yeah,
But we
like
should
that,
probably
that's
start.
I think we should read the whole chapter because to me
It gives it
context.
Correct.
So, you want to read, Kenneth?
Sure. I'll start out.
You don't remember how to read?
I don't know how to read 13 verses. What's a better version to read?
New International.
That's a bougie Bible comment. Like, what version should I read?
From the 4 that you have there?
From the 4 that I have here, because God loves me more. Cry aloud, spare not. Lift up your voice. Chapter verse 1.
No,
It's amplified.
Oh, that's not what
Sorry.
my says.
Cry aloud, spare not. Lift up your voice like a trumpet and declare to my people their transgression and to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek or inquire for and require me daily and delight external. I'm not reading this one because
I can't follow.
people aren't going to be able to follow it.
I told you.
NIV,
All right,
please.
we'll do NIV. We'll do NIV.
Thank you.
Shout it aloud. Do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right, and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions, and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting you do as you please, and exploit all of your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed, or for lying in sackcloth and ashes? This is really good. Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. And then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer, and you will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and he will strengthen your frame. You will be a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations, and you will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, and if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride in triumph on the heights of the land and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. For the mouth of the Lord is spoken.
Can I tell you I kind of resented Isaiah 58?
Why is that?
Because our church used to say it every Sabbath as an affirmation of faith. And I was like,
The whole thing?
no, just
Oh,
from
just
13.
that 13?
But I was like, this has nothing to do with the affirmation of my faith. And I despised it ever since.
How do you feel about it today?
I get it now that I read the other verses in the Genesis. It makes more sense now.
But it's not an affirmation of faith.
It is no, it's not. But that's just what they picked.
Gotcha.
'Cause-
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the context of the Sabbath, what do you hear, Kevin?
You can't go golf.
No. You said what?
You can't golf.
Oh, I didn't think that's what you said.
Can't see.
It's still open-ended.
I agree. And I would have.
However, but a little more, but there's a little bit more definition.
What definition did you hear?
So it adds a little bit more definition to holy. And so, and I don't know, maybe I'm taking this out of context, but all the verses that led up to it kind of start providing a picture of what that looks like.
What the sandbox looks like. Look at you.
Right?
What picture did you see?
So it talks about the thing, well, first it talks about how people were abusing it, right? But then it talks about, was it verse 6? Is not this the kind of fasting I've chosen? And granted, he's talking about the thing, but to loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, to break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. You know, so it starts giving in, because although it's specifically talking about fasting here, and we're talking specifically about the Sabbath down there, I think in totality it's talking about these holy days, these special times that you're saying that you're dedicating to God, whether it's fasting for whatever reason. It was saying, you know, all the things you're doing, you're saying you're fasting for this, but your actions, you know, are not of me.
They're all about you.
They're all about you. And so he comes down at the end, and it's very clear that this day isn't. So to tack on, it's rest and not do those things you were doing
That are about you.
that are about you. And there's some other things that you may do outside of what you were doing the previous 6 days. And those things should not be about you. And
And then there's still the freedom.
then there's still the freedom outside of that to be whatever it is.
Well, what does that
But
look
it's
like,
interesting. It
Like how-
never.
though? I mean, because when it comes to the Sabbath, some people, I see tendency extremes. So two ends, but never like the middle region, depending on who's looking at it.
Right.
There's a culture that literally don't do what they were doing those other days.
So can I push you a little bit?
Mhm.
So can you give me examples of the two
but-
extremes and what that
But I
middle-
mean, that's what I said. Depending on the person, it may look extreme. So
Oh,
there are the
okay, it
cultures
may
that
look,
don't
okay.
do
Got you.
nothing, like no
put-
cooking, no
don't put on the
cleaning,
stove.
Correct.
no
And
nothing,
things
not
like
even
that.
walking a certain. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And to some, depending on who it is, oh my gosh, like you guys are doing too much. But to somebody else, it might be this is them doing
Correct.
what that says. And then on the other end, there are those who work and whatever and say they are doing those things. They're at work, but they're, you just see what I'm saying? Depending on the perspective you're looking at.
Let me ask this. I am agreeing with Sharika's contribution that the relationship kind of guides the way the space looks.
Mm-hmm.
But given that he's talking to a group of people here, it's a group relationship that's guiding this. And is it individuals and group? So it's just me and him and then it's us? Or is it us?
So
Because this is he wasn't talking to one
so
person
this
here.
is
Yeah.
so but I just believe God is so big because he's talking to them and he's talking about very specific things at the beginning. These are things that you're doing
As a group of people.
as a group of people. This is very, and that probably didn't include everybody, right? But as a group of people, he's saying, you guys are doing this. You know, when our President Trump speaks to us, you know, he makes generalities.
Right.
Every president does, right?
Mhm.
But not everybody's doing those things,
Correct.
right? So he's saying that. I think God doesn't necessarily. So I think God gives us these ideas and these concepts and these to-dos, but I just think he also created us differently so that even within that space, Sharika's may look a little different than yours, and yours may look a little different than mine, and you know, we keep going through,
But together we're consistent.
but together we're consistent. And I guess the biggest thing is that even if it looks different,
It's still consistent.
it's still, well,
It still can be consistent.
it still can be consistent. But even if it doesn't look the same, that's not your
So is the Sabbath
responsibility.
more mental then? Like, is it more like where you are with God versus what it actually looks like when somebody sees you doing whatever it is that you're doing on the Sabbath?
No.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because if it looks different for each person,
Because I could be holding a corner in somewhere that I should not be.
But that's the,
And you don't know my mental space.
but why am I responsible
And
for
this-
that?
right? That's what I'm saying. Like
Right.
we make judgments about people breaking
No,
the
I'm
Sabbath.
not I'm responsible for me.
That's what
in
I'm
this
saying. But
spot.
I think that's what she's
Yeah.
alluding to. Like,
but in the same breath,
We still a community.
we're still and there's still some sort of accountability here.
Correct.
I know better. Regardless, if I have the mental space to say I'm observing the Sabbath, I don't need to hold that corner.
but what are you?
Over
But I mean,
this
but
corner.
what are you accountable for?
What do you mean?
The only thing you be accountable for is your actions.
Yes, but he's
But
giving
then,
Yeah,
if
he's
specific.
you're,
right.
if you, so here's kind of my pushback with that. If we're in community, right? God might say, Avanique, I have no problem with you doing X, Y, Z on the Sabbath. But then Sharika's looking at me going, oh, look at her breaking the Sabbath.
No, but if you're in community and we hold each other accountable, that's conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a
That's,
lot
first of all, it's conversation, and I might get a better understanding of
Where you're coming from.
where you're coming from, and what
Yeah.
you're doing, and so that kind of eliminates that.
but here's
But
the,
we do. Go ahead. I'm
sorry, here's the confusion though, because In all the churches I've been to, when I ask about when do the Sabbath discussion on what to do on the Sabbath, everybody has different answers. So even though we're within a community, the answer seems to look different for different churches, different groups, different area you live in, different countries.
And the biggest thing about the fact that the answers are different is that people are looking and listening to the answers, and some of those answers are wrong.
Right. So
Some
that
of those
was
answers
my
are not
next
God.
point.
Huh?
Some of the answers are not of God.
Some of the answers are wrong.
Yeah, they're
Your fasting ends in crawling and strife.
yeah,
That's
Right.
wrong.
That's wrong.
Right. No.
Y'all can keep
But-
it up if y'all want, but it ain't
Exploiting
right.
the workers.
Correct.
That's
No.
wrong.
You can be in agreement, it's still wrong.
So those
They're
are
clear,
things that are wrong,
Yeah.
right? And I think that, and once again, I think there are measurables here that you can apply to what you're doing, but there are also things that can't be measured, right?
Like Jesus healing sick people.
Well, not even Jesus healing sick people. I mean,
Because you had some people who
I
thought
mean-
that was wrong.
speaking idle words.
They
Picking
did.
that corn.
Speaking idle words. You define what speaking idle words is. You define what speaking idle. You define, and there's going to be 5 different
If
definitions.
we're in community, I know when Jared is being idle
Because you know Jared.
because he being worthless, and so therefore,
know
no. Let's be
So
honest.
But
to
you
me,
have to
those
know
are idle
Jared, though.
words.
But that's
I don't
community.
even know what that means.
So then there's different communities. You see what I'm saying?
Right, but what we're saying is when you're in community with someone, or in this group here, the people he's
Yeah.
talking to, you people know each other. Right?
Okay.
You may not all be guilty, but you're carrying on with a level of foolishness that we're not questioning that it is or isn't foolishness. It's foolishness. And you're holding this over your eyes thinking that this is what I'm asking you for.
Okay, now here's a question though. Okay, so for the group that would be, depending on who it is, see it as extreme. The don't watch, don't do anything. Somebody within that community could decide, hey, I'm gonna take a walk on the Sabbath. Oh my gosh, the community has
right.
lost its mind
Right.
because now they done started walking and washing.
And
or
that's
whatever
the-
these
and
people
a
say.
lot
that's
of
the-
times-
but that's
That
the-
should be walking and worshiping.
Right,
Like,
that's
we
what I'm
got it,
saying.
like,
Like,
you ain't-
remember,
but the
there's a
whole
mix.
church is like,
There's a
oh,
mix
she's
here.
bugging.
From the Orthodox Jew all the way to the Seventh-day Church of God, or to the Jews or the Jehovah Witness that go to church on Sabbath, people are taking tradition, Mosaic law, and God law, and saying, "All right, I pick from this pot of what I want,
What you want?
and I'm out." Right, and so some of us are taking the 10th.
Yeah.
Some of us are taking just the 4th, and some of us are taking the other 300 Mosaic laws that were running around the place. And so in those communities, yes, if I chose not to take the don't light your stove, I'm gonna be like, oh,
And not even just that,
But
people take their personal convictions and then it becomes.
But what I'm
it
saying,
becomes,
it's everything.
It becomes,
Yeah.
oh no, this
Tradition.
is for everybody. When that
Yeah.
was God telling
That was God
you,
telling you.
you don't do it because you
but
have
It's
a
definite.
problem.
But what I'm
that's the-
saying is
but
you're
that's
not
how-
you're not in a position to say yes, no, maybe. So when, unless you're gonna sit down and say, Jared, let me ask you a question. In reference to you not lighting your stove, where did that come from?
But that's the beauty of God. And I guess that's my frustration. Like, let it all exist. Like, let God work that out.
If you are allowing him to work it with you.
No. Let him work it
Now,
out.
player, there's certain people that not even open
No,
to
but
God
that's
working it
but
out.
you can, that's not my responsibility.
I'm not. No, what I'm saying is you have to have an open spirit and a spirit for relationships.
But that's
for
the
him
problem.
to
Right,
work it
right.
out with you.
Right.
Let me bring some.
But that's not my
But who can
responsibility
tell- who
to
can
determine
tell-
I'm not
you have
telling
an
you it's
open
right or
or
wrong.
not.
I'm saying there are people who are purposely closed-minded
Right.
to
right,
it.
Right.
Like I am to this. And it's you can't. Like you have to.
I'm not saying I can tell Kenrick. I'm
No,
saying
but what I'm
Kenrick
saying is-
needs to make sure him and God are on the same
Like,
page.
Well, in
so
reference
God
to
gets
the
over.
community thing is what I'm going back to. How do you?
I just think there's an effort that's where we want people
We want
like
them to
we
do
use
what
the
we're
word
doing.
community, and I think some people use the word community that we have to think alike.
Right.
And so my thing is, I keep saying the same thing. Maybe I'm not like I suck articulating anything, but
It's possible.
no, that's actually reality. God is big enough, right? to allow everyone to do their thing.
Right.
And he's big enough to deal with it. Whereas in this community, and my responsibility in this community, whatever that community is to love. Now, there are times when there are things that are very defined, and those things are violated that, and they're stated here, and you can call people out on.
Yeah.
Right? But there are also times when it may look different from you, and you may think it's wrong. And it's not your responsibility to call you out, to call somebody out on it, nor does God give us the authority to do it.
So when you say call
We
someone
all
out,
can't create this homogenous society. It just doesn't work, or community. It doesn't work.
when you say call someone out, are you saying telling you I think it's wrong, or asking your thought process behind
Depending
the
on
action?
who it is.
I think sometimes
Some
even
people just
questioning it.
But
I mean, you
not-
could have a
Isn't
conversation.
that what it means to be in relationship?
Yeah,
though?
you could have a
Was that again?
conversation.
Isn't that what it means to be in relationship though? Where you do something and because we have a relationship, I could inquire about it, or let's just say it's not one of the things that's clearly on the no list, right? Let's say it's not on the no list, but I know. Let's say I know Sharika, and I know Sharika's tendencies.
Correct.
And I know that thing that she's doing, while it's not on the no list, is something that's being driven by her need to create.
Correct.
In relationship,
You know
in
her.
community, I could call her out on it.
Correct.
Right?
But that's
Even
that's
within,
smaller
but
community.
even within relationships in a community, it's still different. Like not everyone's
Yeah.
going to have the same relationship in a community. Like
You
you
could say the
you go
same
to
thing,
a church,
Adventist community,
you go
yeah.
to a church, even within like even
Yeah,
a
within-
local
and then that's
church.
not really a
Not
community.
everyone is they consider that a community,
Let's throw the flag
right?
right
But there's still people that you know better than you know other people.
Multiple communities, in
Right?
that thing.
So even
Yeah,
within this
exactly.
community,
That's what I'm saying.
you
Several-
want the ideal is that everybody's on the same page heading this way, right? No, that's why people look at community.
I
When
agree
you
with
go
you.
to a church,
I think
everybody's on the same page
that is
looking this
essentially
way.
what has been pushed forward.
I guess we don't have the same definition of community.
We don't.
No.
we don't.
I'm not
But
saying that.
that's the way our
Yeah.
churches have been
Yeah.
set up, though.
But it's
we
not-
do the same
it's
thing.
churches in
we walk in the
general.
same we walk in the same road, doing the exact same thing. You have to look like me, smell like me, appear like me. If you don't, then something is wrong with you, and you have to go. You don't fit in. That's what I'm used to.
That's what.
This idea of community to me is brand new. Not that it's brand new in this moment, but it's brand new in, wait a minute, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. We don't, as a church, we don't do community the way the Bible tells us to do community. We do, here we are, Adventists, we don't wear jewelry, we don't eat certain things, we don't go to the movies, we don't do, and it's kind of like, okay,
We just don't.
that doesn't even
but it's not just specific to Adam. I mean, it's
No, I mean,
it's-
any-
it's
any
different.
church,
right, this church,
Any
this church group,
denomination,
the
like
body.
churches, typically
Any group of people.
you
Yeah.
want
The body.
people to head in one
Well,
direction.
not just churches, like any
Different
group of
group.
people.
right.
No, no. That's why I said it's branding. Like you because at the end of the day, like I guess we're marketing, and if you want someone to come in and you don't want to be telling them something, and then they come in and they see something different over here, and they're like, oh, why are they doing that? So you're like, no, we're all gonna do this. I get it.
But
I just don't know if that's what God-
stifling. That
I
is
don't know if God
stifling to
intended
your
that to
walk with
happen.
They
Christ.
include some other people from online. Daryl says, I personally define the word holy as God's special property. That helps me understand the concepts of what is appropriate. Lily adds its context. I guess what we were talking about in Isaiah 58. Look at who he's talking to and it explains itself. The plan is not to be agreeable to your brother, but rather each person to be loyal and following God's words. Not accountability, and then Leah says, not accountability solely. It's about the impact we have on each other. Daryl adds, from my Caribbean background, I think of those special dishes that are placed on the top shelf and don't get pulled out except for on special occasions, holy. But even more so, I see God as saying, don't forget this day. It belongs to me. This time is mine. Even more so, I use it as a tool to make you mine. So don't treat it like your day to do what you want. It belongs to me. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, man, Daryl.
So
I've had a lot of conversations with you. You are deeper than I thought.
yeah, there is.
It's a new year, bro.
It's a new year.
New Daryl.
Got them 19.
Lily says we seem to spend a lot of time trying to watch and judge whether I'm doing right or she's doing. It is community, but yet your understanding and God will hold each of us accountable. Pauline says, whether you are in community or not, we are not an account. God meets us where we are. Your job in community is to give love, not judgment. Lily adds again, that's why some people on the outside stay away, because they just don't seem to fit in at all.
Because when a lot of people
Debbie
ask
Grant
me, what do you do on
says-
Sabbath?
Debbie Grant, go home.
Right. We should be on the
Who
same
said
page.
that?
Debbie Grant.
I didn't realize it was that Debbie Grant.
Go home, Debbie Grant.
And Ron adds, Numbers 15:32 to 36 is something to wrestle with in regards to community decision.
What is it?
Numbers 15:32 to 36 is something to wrestle with in regards to community decision. Debbie Grant follows with, the Sabbath is holy and of God, not to do what we wish.
Numbers 13,
Numbers 15,
15, 13. What is it?
32 to 36.
32
I just
to
meant I can't stay
36.
in my house. Or I'm in trouble.
What were you gonna ask?
I
No,
don't
she was
remember.
saying, people ask her, like, what do you do on the Sabbath?
Yeah, because
Oh.
like when my friends, I tell them, oh yeah, it's my Sabbath, and they're like, so they want a list, like they want, what do you do? Because I guess in any different groups, like you said, we have the different unspoken or spoken guidelines, and so they're like, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, you know,
But
it's
it's a-
different. Like it's always a vague answer because it's like, well,
Like,
because,
is it- Can you
People
say
that-
it's akin to what do you do on a date?
You do whatever
Well,
feels
I
right.
think it's always been advertised. I think it's always been advertised. But it depends on what you do on a date. Like if you only go out once a week.
oh gosh.
As opposed to,
Yeah.
as opposed to,
So when y'all, so this is the thing. So this is the thing. So that's what I'm saying. Like, so this changes my entire relationship with my wife because I put in work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Pick
I
one
was-
day.
I gotta work. I'm working Saturday. I'm about to work.
You're not. You better save all your
I'm
work.
about to work tonight. So I'm saying
I
like.
cannot.
You can't do it no more. You gotta have to change it up.
So, I'm about to text her right now. Be
Stop
like,
the press.
we about to catch a flight back to where can I go? I guess I can go to California.
while the Israelites were in the
But while we
wilderness,
still in the Friday.
Changing time zones.
Kendrick, you're the worst.
while the
Numbers 15:32 through 36. Y'all get
While the
sidetracked.
Israelites were in the wilderness, a man was found gathering wood on the Sabbath day. Those who found him gathering the wood brought him to Moses and Aaron and the whole assembly. They kept him in custody because it was not clear what should be done with him. Then the Lord said to Moses, "The man must die.
This was God
What
the Father.
verse is
I'm with Sharika.
The whole
My
assembly
man.
must stone him
30.
outside the camp." So the assembly took him outside the camp and stoned him to death, as the Lord commanded.
But then Jesus was picking corn on the Sabbath.
Okay, so 2019 version.
Jesus didn't pick the corner.
The disciples were picking corn.
Right.
2019 version.
I just don't.
Within our community,
This is God the Father.
okay,
My
I'm
man's
visiting,
father
right?
stepped in.
I'm not
Please.
here.
Please.
Let's say I went out to the grocery store or wherever, because within our group, that's a no-no. Shopping and
That's what they
whatnot,
do.
or eating. Different communities.
Yes.
Different
No, I got
communities.
you.
You see
I
what
got
I'm
you.
saying?
Yeah, I
Different
got you.
communities.
I got
Okay? So within the communities I've been in, you don't grocery shop. You don't eat out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's nucleuses within my community stuff. But so I would I'm out of town, so I would go to a grocery store or go wherever. If I was in my community and I was in that area, and I showed up at church Sabbath, it'd have been
Yeah.
she must not be. You know what I mean? She
No,
must.
they used to.
But not stoned.
No,
But-
they
Baby stone face.
surprised us. We'd come in with our little golden cross, sit down in the middle of the fellowship hall, and they'd be like, "Man, these young people are so disrespectful. There was no lunch at the church. What were we supposed to do?" But they didn't get. They were like, "It's
They
not
were gonna be
acceptable."
like,
They'd have been
you
like,
better go
oh.
back to Exodus 16.
Like, she must not know
You should
that
have
Sabbath.
had extra lunch
Yeah.
yesterday.
Which goes back to the whole, idea of what it means to do your own thing, one, and two, to be creating for self on the day. and what those kinds of things look like from a motivational standpoint, and not necessarily a checklist of a to-do list. Because you think about Jesus and his community, the people in his community really thought that healing the sick people. They were like, they'd have 6 days to be healed. Go back and come back another day to be healed. Don't come on the Sabbath to get
tomorrow. Get there though. That's
if you're dead, I feel your brother.
But to your point, so that's actually a good question, because when you go back and you read what we read in Isaiah, that's what he talked like. For them to miss that.
Yeah, how did they get to that point?
Because of the Mosaic laws that were given to them in the wilderness to try to get them back on track.
Well, to be
but
fair,
what I'm
they
saying
were trying
is,
as a community not to fall
into
the Isaiah mindset. They were trying to not go back to where the people were in Isaiah.
Because if that happened before me, I'd have been like, nah, you're not getting healed on the Sabbath. I'm not getting stoned for you. Try again another day. I get it.
Tomorrow.
Right. Come back on Sunday. We got you. Not today. Nobody's getting stoned for
As
you.
a matter of fact, I see. Right here. Too much work going on.
To what Kenrick is saying, that's missing the point. It's almost like, I've given you this space where if you start to think about this space in terms of, this is not yours for you to figure out what to do with this. This is mine. I have set it aside. Now I need you to be in relationship with me to understand how to use this space and allow that relationship to guide the things that you do or don't do. Then it becomes a little bit different.
So then you kind of have to not care about what other people think then. That's the way. I mean,
I think
thank you.
I mean, no, only because.
No, that is
only
it.
because. No.
That's how I live my life.
No.
You
only
can't.
Because if you're in that space and God is moving you to do something different from what everybody else is doing.
Well, let's add a scripture on Romans chapter 14. I know it's not talking about this. I know it's not talking about this specifically.
We're gonna go through so many scriptures today. We're not gonna be able to read. It's gonna be fruitless to read this thing eventually. Yeah.
Oh, man, you went so far, like fruitless to read. Like you went.
All right, my
so
bad. Maybe not
far.
Romans what?
Romans 4.
Oh,
4.
4.
I thought you said 14.
14.
Oh, okay.
14 from verse 13. All right, because this is the principle here. He talks about something specifically, but then he kind of gives the guiding principle to address that I think will also have bearing somewhat on these conversations as well. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up on your own mind not to put any stumbling block or be an obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. I am convinced, being fully persuaded in Jesus, that nothing is unclean in itself. If anyone regards something as unclean, then for that person it is unclean. If your brother or sister is distressed because of what you eat, you are no longer acting in love. Do not by your eating destroy someone for whom God died. Therefore, do not let what you know to be good be spoken of as evil. For the kingdom of God is not a matter of eating and drinking, but of righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. Because anyone who serves Christ in this way is pleasing to God and receives human approval. And this is the point I wanted to make. Let us make every effort to do what leads to peace and mutual edification. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food.
I mean, I get it.
You can still not worry about what other people say.
I get it, but I'm.
So just consider the other person's perspective. Let's carry on.
No,
I mean, because
So here's my problem with that, right?
Your problem with what?
This.
Okay.
You do have, and no matter where you are, no matter what church you go to, no matter how open people are, no matter how closed-minded people are, no matter where you go, you will always find a set of people that think, this is thus saith the Lord, and nothing else should deviate any type of way.
So let me set some context before you go there. In this particular chapter, Paul is not talking about the people who are self-righteous or establishing places of righteousness. These are the people who are, I thought it was wrong to do that, but they're doing it. Now I'm confused. What am I supposed to do?
Okay, so then I understand.
It's those people he's asking you not to,
And that's fine. That's completely acceptable. But the self-righteous ones are the most vocal, and the ones that are sitting in the front of the seat going, oh, so you just not gonna come in for 9:15 and think you gonna go to heaven? It's like, what are you talking about? That's my only. But I get it. If now that you put it in that context, I understand and I completely agree.
So then, does that change depending on the community that you're in at the time?
I would say yes.
So
I would say yes, but that's just my personal opinion.
So I have different views on certain things.
You think?
A couple, right? But I also, to Jared's point, there's certain conversations I won't have around certain people.
It's true.
Right? Because number one is to maintain peace. Number two, I say it again. I
Don't
really
care to explain
believe this
yourself.
thing. Well, no, I think this thing is big enough to where I can have my thoughts in relationship with God, and they can have theirs, and we're both okay.
Fine.
Like, we're both fine. And I don't need to persuade you that I'm right or persuade you that you're doing, that's fine. And then I can work this thing out myself, and we don't need to do it. So there's some conversations that just don't need to be had. Because why have the confusion? Why promote it? And then number two, I just try to give God more credit than.
But
than
you
that.
would have to know that person to know whether or not you're being accepted.
No, there's just certain people. There's just certain conversations I just won't have because I don't know.
So it's interesting. I think one of the things that we have been wrestling with, and we don't have a shared understanding in general of a community, right? When these cameras go off, the things that we may talk about here, we're definitely, I shouldn't say definitely.
Say what you gotta say.
Definitely not the word. More than likely, will not talk about in a more conservative or formal manner, simply because this community is understanding of you gonna believe. I'm not here to convince you. You're not here to convince me. We're gonna
Just
wrestle with
sharing,
this a little bit and keep it moving. I think there is strength in the birds of a feather flock together thing, and we've given community this because I share air with you. I'm in community with you. Versus,
That was so broad.
I have, but that's what
We're
people
all a
think. You know, just because
No,
we go
it's
to
true.
church together, we're in a community together. We're not. We're in a building together. Community is very relationship based, and for us to have a true relationship, there has to be a level of acceptance of that's Kenrick, and I'm cool with that. And Kenrick in year 3 isn't the Kenrick in year 5, and still a homie. We're still good to go.
He's worse.
We're probably all worse, bro. But
That's just all. Kidding.
but what I'm saying is, if we're gonna blanket and say because I share air, we should get along. That's not fair.
Right.
And I think that's another. People have this instinct desire to be accepted wherever they walk in, and so therefore you have this. Pardon?
Apology.
Yeah, it's
But can I push back and say that
it's weird.
you can though?
What?
Like, because we share air.
I mean, it's one community.
I can.
It's
No. I can want to be accepted. I shouldn't expect you to be accepted. Accept me.
Okay.
I can go in there and say, yo, you should take this. But I can't be vexed if you don't. And that's
Sure.
the problem.
Yeah.
Everyone's upset because, oh, you don't accept me. I'm not in community with you, bro. Like, and that's cool. But do your thing.
But if you think about,
But doing your thing, that is a acceptance.
No. Acceptance, in many cases, I can tell people, I don't like that you do that. That ain't got nothing to do with me. I haven't accepted that you do it. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying do your thing. Don't look for me for any sort of agreement or validation or anything. It's just, yo, live your life. I see you when I see you. A lot of people are uncomfortable with the fact that it's like, yo, do your thing. Or you insulted me. No, I'm telling you to do what you want to do. Don't look to me to validate or invalidate it.
Lily adds, date is good because we always on
Oh, yeah,
our
we
best
forgot
behavior, and our date God is most important and treated as such. That scripture indicates balance. We should be mindful not to deliberately offend, but at the same time, don't be swayed by every wind of doctrine. Daryl asks, what about Jesus' response here in John chapter 5, verses 16 to 18?
We're going to go through this.
And therefore, he included the scripture here, so we didn't have to actually look through it.
Having a hot flash.
And therefore,
You just read
did the
it.
Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered to them, my Father worketh hitherto, and I work.
John 5?
15. Can you read it in the,
John
in a
5.
version that doesn't have hitherto?
John what?
John 5.
17.
16 to 18.
16. 18.
Don't do amplified neither, bro.
Yeah, dude. Only 2
I
verses.
like
Only 2 verses.
Amplified.
We can do Amplify for this one. John 15 and 16?
No, 16, 17, 18.
Dang, I can't hear. Alright, 16. For this reason the Jews began to persecute or annoy and torment Jesus, and sought to kill him because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father has worked even until now. So we got to go back on this one. And he has never ceased working.
That's why I told you. Get that That's Daryl.
Did you
Daryl, we just got through this, dude. You blew my mind and now you're unblowing it? Alright. But Jesus answered them, my Father has worked even until now. He has never ceased working. He is still working. And I too must be at divine work. This made the Jews more determined than ever to kill him, to do away with him, because he not only was breaking or weakening or violating the Sabbath, but he actually was speaking of God as being, in a special sense, his own Father, making himself equal or putting himself on the same level with God. All right, so we got to put a pin in that. Okay, we can't put a pin in it.
What does my Bible say? Because I must be the amplified version.
Dude, you can't get clearer than that.
I don't know.
That's Visine, dog.
Nah, but
16, for this reason the Jews were persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But he answered them, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. For this reason, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him because he not only
What's the
was
word
breaking-
for working?
What
What's that
was he
working word?
doing that he said work? He was healing people.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't out here plowing the fields. Going back to the
So
point
in
of
parenthesis in here it says divine work.
right,
So he wasn't.
Yeah, so he's about his father's business.
right, and that's fine.
The space that you talked about.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
space.
the space.
Like
So
what
don't
God-
do this.
yeah.
Just don't do this, but
Yeah, you can go do the healing even
well,
in Isaiah.
no, that's what I'm saying. It goes back to
Yeah.
Isaiah, and that's why I was saying when she mentioned like how did the Pharisees get to that point in Isaiah, it was very specific as to what you were doing that I didn't want and the things that I want you to promote. It was taking care of the naked. It was healing. It was all those different things. I don't think I mentioned healing, but it was all those different things that it was saying you should do, which is why it blows me. Like, how do you get to the point where you're upset about doing those things?
Because you misunderstood what the thing
And
was.
take it out of context and do whatever else you want to
Because
do.
you
with it.
misunderstood the point. It's almost like when you're in a relationship with somebody and you're trying to tell them you don't like them when they do these things, and they start doing this checklist thing, and you're like, that's not what I'm asking. I mean, yes, it was nice that you did the dishes, but that's
That was right.
that wasn't it. You missed it. But I did this and I did that. You missed it. What I was actually asking you to do was to think more about me.
Right.
So I guess the checklist is not genuine then.
It's not.
It's not
Because
natural.
it's not coming out
Out
of
of okay.
of your understanding of what's required. It's like what Kenrick was talking about with last time he was on with regards to
With Jewel.
And coming to the place where the things that he just doesn't do, not because it's on the list of things to do, but because there is no list. He's just out of his relationship. These are things that he avoids.
See, that's hard for me because I like detail. I like instructions. I need to be clear. I need to know what I need to do. I mean, but at the same
But
time,
that's
I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. Of course, I'm not trying to offend or be a stumbling block, but
that's the beauty of community because we
But-
mix.
and that's what I was gonna
There are a
say.
little bit of those people, and there's some of us others.
Like that's not wrong. And that's
Don't care.
and so
I mean,
that's,
that's what
and that's a
I'm
beautiful
saying.
part because we're all so different. Like
But that's why I find it hard. The Sabbath, the issue of knowing what I'm supposed to do on the Sabbath is so hard because I want a list. There's no list, but I want some kind of 2019 applicable because that a lot of that stuff.
That's why they have
why? Hold on, why?
Last
You just
time-
don't trust yourself?
I mean, that's just how I'm set up. Like that's just how I'm wired. Like I like instructions. I like to know clearly what you expect of me. So in my relationship with God, because I know whether or not I'm veering or I'm on track.
Is it okay for me
Because-
to watch Thor because Pureflix is boring?
Like there was a show. What show was
I watched my
watching?
first Pure Flix show the other
It's
day.
so trash.
some of them are better than others.
It actually was fine. It wasn't bad.
There was a show because for example, there was a show I was watching. I don't remember the name of it, but depending on the community that you're in,
Because we watch some stuff.
there's some shows. Like for me, older me would normally not watch like certain kind of vampire. Or I could see the show in my mind, but witch type stuff because I ain't messing with that stuff in real life, right?
Well, this is Jared.
But
You'll find like 7 Bible verses to go with it.
but I found myself watching the show and actually pulling biblical. No, I'm not even lying. No, I'm not. No. But that's what I'm saying. That was me before would not have even engaged. But I found myself watching the show and was like, "Wow, God!" Like I was
What are you
actually
watching?
pulling.
The
I
Walking
equate
Dead?
that to
No,
like,
oh no, I don't. Mess
I
with that
equate
show.
that to like Christian porn. Like, it's not, like
But that's
no
what
one's pulling Bible verses out of that.
it wasn't
Whatever.
the same, folks.
I'm sorry. That's my fault.
What time is it?
Yeah, it's after
It's 9:58.
Alright,
Not
okay.
10 o'clock. It's
It's 10
9:58.
o'clock. So
I'm sorry.
I want to quickly jump to
Daryl's comment.
Revelation 9.
Oh,
Sorry.
Daryl has a good comment.
Okay, go ahead, read it.
What if we read the Sabbath command as God saying, "For 6 days I'll follow you in your work, but on this 7th day let's trade places and you follow me in my work"? Would that help?
You know what makes a difference for me? Looking at it as God going, Avanique, take a break.
But I could take a break and watch TV all day.
Again, of course, I'm not going to watch Thor.
No,
But
let's
but
say
I
you
mean,
start there.
take a break.
Let's say you start there and watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
In your relationship with God, that's not the type of break I said.
Right.
How about we try something else?
Right.
Yeah, but then I'm left like, okay,
No.
so
What?
But that's the thing
That's
about
the,
it.
That's the relationship
process.
piece. That's the process.
Oh, so it's trial and error.
It's
You
tri-
try and then you get
you're
convicted
figuring
to do
out what's
differently.
pleasing
Why
to
not?
God in your relationship. So you might be like, "All right, God, I'll turn off the TV.
It's both.
I'm gonna go to the park and walk around then." All right, try that. And you might run into somebody. You might have a good conversation, or you might whatever, and you be like, "Yeah, that's good rest." So next week you might start there again. I don't really want you in the park this week. I kind of want you to go somewhere. Like,
Right.
there's no way to predict it,
Right.
but the relationship is growing
It's
because
growing because
you're
it's
following
constant.
and you're dialoguing. Let's start with the TV. And just say, honestly, God, I don't know what you want me to do, but I'm going to turn the TV on. And so tell me if this is right or wrong. It's uncomfortable, but that's
And
really how it
there's
works.
also the communal tension that will occur in the same kind of thing as we do this together and figure out that this is not what God wants us to do.
Right.
What was interesting about this Revelation 7 thing? Revelation 7.
Isaiah.
Revelation 7 verse 9.
It's in the back.
Oh no.
It's just as we were talking about community, and Kendrick was saying it's big enough. This text came to mind. Revelation 7:9. He says, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne, before the Lamb." That's a real big community of sub-communities.
Yes.
And they're different.
And they're all different.
All different.
And they're not all now speaking the same language necessarily. They're not all
The same type
All-
of race or
Time,
Right.
age.
like
Era.
age, like era, like all that age, like
and it doesn't seem like they're being asked
to be
to
the
give
same.
up any of
Right.
these
who they
things.
are.
They in their tribal wear, they in their regular wear, they in their street clothes.
They
They
ain't
chilling.
nowhere.
Or they're
Right.
talking different languages because I don't understand what they're saying over there.
But you supposed to be here and I'm supposed to be here, so we good. Like,
And I'm sure the application and interpretation of a lot of the things that God wants looks different.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had an assignment one time from Dr. Rand, and he said, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And then we started asking the questions you were asking. So how we go? I said, I don't really care. Figure that out. But I just need you to get this and this. And
That's
I'd have
uncomfortable
these
for me.
elements included.
It is for people. It's 100% because, and I think it's a society that we're in where we're not. I mean, it's school. You're given rules and directions. You're not allowed to. I do that one exercise with the kids where I'm like, I put up a large ant and a small elephant, and I'm like, which one is bigger? And they can never just answer the question however they see it. They're always like, okay, what do you mean bigger? Like, do you mean this bigger? Like, people always want parameters. And
But then it's interesting that God, like Dr. Rand in that instance, his parameters aren't the ones that we necessarily want.
correct.
He has these elements that are important to him that he wants to be there, but he wants to give. And that's why I like the beginning of the book. It starts by saying he made man in his own image, and then he gave them space to be in dominion over the things that he created
Let
for
them
them.
name them, do all that.
And he let them kind of, this is yours, figure it out.
Right.
Yep.
But figure it out keeping this thing in mind.
Yo.
And then Jesus comes to restore that
Right.
with the Holy Spirit. He comes to restore that and bring us back to that
We
place.
keep straying from that though.
because
Because
there's comfort.
Just chill.
There's comfort in boundaries.
I'm
Look at
asking
you.
to
You got
just-
blankets on. Like, people like
There's comfort in boundaries.
take it off. Like, people like that.
Covering.
But then we just become so uptight, and we become so miserable
But you
because
put yourself
I have
there.
and right, but like, what's the phrase they use in New York? Sad Ventist or mad Ventist, because we just angry, we bitter because we go to work and we go to school. We go to work and we go to church. We can't have fun because the Bible says we can't have fun, and we just angry and we mean to each other. We mean to other people because you get to have fun on a Sabbath and I have to stay here in this church and not have fun all throughout my life. When it's like that's not what he called you to do. He said, here's the core of what I'm looking for. Live your life. Love the people around you. Live your life. And we just be like,
It's interesting how we get that when we read the whole Bible cover to cover.
right. It's the
Like
same
we did
thing.
tonight.
It's the same thing.
You're a jerk, Dredd.
Dude, they're gonna be like, how many times y'all read the Bible? We read it twice this year. The first time we read on the 4th.
And then we read
And
it
then
from
we
the
read
fourth
it
to
from
the.
the we read I'm just messing. It was good. It's good to go to work.
Let's do our takeaways from our conversation tonight. Because it is 10 o'clock and we need to transition out of this conversation. Lorraine, you got a chance to go first tonight.
My takeaway is just be ready to be uncomfortable.
Words.
That's a good one.
So, I mean, there's no way to get the list that I naturally would want. And I find I want it more for my Christian life than my regular life. Because my regular life, I mean, it's different though, but I mean, like, outside of church, I mean, everybody knows I'm Christian, but like my regular, I'm just me, and you take it, you leave it, you throw it away, you can put it aside, accept me or not accept me. I'm actually okay with that. But in the Christian sense, like part of when I told you guys a while back why I kind of stopped from church, because I felt like I had to dress. Like, not like nobody told me I had to dress a certain way. I just want to wear, I just want to go.
Tired.
Like, that's it. I just want to come to church in sweatpants and a t-shirt.
'Cause you're
But if
Russian.
I walked in with a
Doesn't
sweatpants
give
and a
the Dutch
t-shirt,
looks.
you see what I'm saying? So it's kind of hard. So I just gotta be ready to just be uncomfortable and just follow his leading. Be uncomfortable.
I want to process with you after that
Okay.
church life, regular life
Okay.
thing.
I
If we
knew
were on
that
the couch,
was, I knew that was coming.
If it wasn't so late,
As soon as she said it, I was like,
I mean, my relationship with people compared to my relationship with God.
yeah.
I believe.
For me, it would be that God's intention is for me to have a well-rounded life.
Okay.
So this was good. That's my takeaway.
What's
should
good
be
about
last.
it? Let's do that. Let's do that
Can't have a
then.
follow up and takeaway. So I've read Isaiah 58, but I've never read it aloud. And when I read it aloud and actually was hearing it, that was going down. Like it gives context to Genesis 2 to Exodus 16 to Exodus 20. Like as you're going through, it gives context, and you know, I've always focused on 13 through 15, whatever it is, 14. But now there's a little bit more context in what that looks like, and what that day should look like. You know, the chains of injustice, unite the cords of yoke. You know, set the oppressed free. Like it gives you a little bit more context. Gives me a lot more context as to what that day looks like.
Like a dating blog gives suggestions on things you can do for a date,
Yeah.
but it's not limited to dinner and a movie.
It's not limited to dinner or movie. It could be. There's so many things you can do that are fine, which leads you to believe, like, so why? To the first question that kind of started off, like, why did people feel like it had to change? Like, because it's
To
such
control
a
the community.
because it's such a there's nothing wrong with it. Like it's actually what you should be doing, and what I would imagine if people actually understood what the meaning was, would be completely fine with it.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how the world is coming to that understanding.
Correct.
They are coming to it. Sharika?
Two things. One, it's very clear that God the Father is saying, I am not here to make you comfortable.
Why is that clear? Sorry. Continue.
So I guess this is gonna go on after the
We don't leave here until Sunday. And also, you're the same person, just different activity. Just as the Father was the same person, just different activity. I kind of gathered that from Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Got you. Yeah, God is big enough. Was my takeaway. You know, for all of us to be different.
Yeah.
It's big enough to accommodate that. Yet unified in our respect for Him. Because that's also what this verse demonstrates. And what I heard out of our conversation. In all their differences, they were unified in their respect for Him, for the way they live their lives, despite the differences. I think so. Yeah, that's my takeaway. Vanessa?
I have no idea.
No idea. Okay. Tell me your name.
She's been the one commenting. That's
Lily.
why I said to Amanique, I was like, which Lily?
I feel like, oh my God,
You're just sitting over there off camera.
Let's have a space right here. Come on, man. Take away, Lily. You want to type
wrote it.
You know
Yeah,
what?
you might as well type it in.
She might have already. Who knows?
You wrote it already.
Seek ye first the kingdom. All these things will be added.
Oh my god.
You know what? I'm gonna do that next week. I'm just gonna sit over there.
Gosh, thank you.
Isaiah 58. Daryl says, "All things I think are the things I think pleases God really just selfish, or does it serve others? Are my ideas of keeping the Sabbath all about the don'ts, or wrapped up in the does, in the do's? Am I clinging to boundaries or striving to get a deeper relationship with God? Repairers of the Sabbath breach need to have clear answers to these. I think I want to be on the side of relationship, service, and the do's. Sabbath ain't dead."
Dang, Daryl.
He on it.
Yo!
New Year.
Different Daryl.
More like same old Daryl, 'cause that's not our Daryl.
What's up with Daryl at home?
This
Not at home.
not
Oh, that's not Daryl. Daryl?
that's not like Rachel Daryl.
No, that's
Oh.
not Daryl. No.
Who's Daryl is that?
This is a partner from Trinidad, Daryl Daniel.
Oh, that's TD. Trinidad.
That's right.
Alright.
That's right.
Squared.
Alright, well, thank you guys for the conversation. I know we didn't really get to dive into the little bit of promos we read so
We got
far
through
and
nothing.
whatnot. We stayed in the
Stuck on the Sabbath.
we stayed in the Sabbath on the
Amazing.
Sabbath, but I think it was rich.
Yes.
No.
Nah,
It's amazing how you read the whole Bible and you still talk about one topic.
Correct. So we're looking forward to this 5th time through. I think this will be number 2 for you. I'm looking forward to this 5th time too, and encourage you guys to join in with us. It's transformative when you have the context and you can see the entire picture to get a better understanding for application to making this thing real every day. Lorraine, but I want to ask you to pray as our guest.
Lord, thank you for another day. Thank you for another Sabbath, Lord. A lot of people didn't make it into 2019, but I thank you that we are here fellowshipping with each other and studying your word and learning more about what you expect of us, Lord. Pray that you will be with each of us tonight, and help us all to get to our homes safely. And I pray that you'll be with everyone online as well, in their homes and in their lives. I pray that we will all grow together and learn more about you. In Jesus' name I do pray. Amen.
Amen. If you don't have the app already, go get the app. It's free. It's free. And it allows you to just kind of read real simple. You just push the today button, and it's right there. All the readings for the day in any language, well, not any language, in several languages, and any English version you need. All right.
True.
Till next time,
Drink up.
drink up.
It's sad that I heard dream.
You're like water when I'm thirsty. Like water when I'm thirsty. You're like water when I'm thirsty.
This is water for the thirsty.
Water for the thirsty.
Water for the thirsty.
Water for the thirsty. Drink up. Drink up.
Drink up. Hashtag Instagram, Facebook. We all there. Follow us.
So God
Tweet us.
created the world
I have a mic on right now.
and was not divine work.
Sidebar. Jared, you on the stage tomorrow, right? Is Sister Johnson gonna be at church?
I'm not
Oh
preaching.
my
I'm
God.
just doing the invocation.
What?
It played all the way through, and it's
What are we trying to
Okay.
wear?
I plan to. I'm just not taking this out.
No. You have to be on the pulpit tomorrow?
I'm leading worship.
Ah, I dare you.
I can't.
It's still-
just got done.
It's still playing though. It's still.
She gonna take off
How
the
did
braids.
you-
What she gonna do?
How do you know what to do?
Your ears?
Kill-
You,
kill
your
it.
ears, you just got your
I'm
ears
trying
pierced?
to get it.
Oh, I'm getting mine pierced.
Which one?
But
Both of them.
he looked at me like,
Because Wyatt Cass is good.
Jewel keeps
Yeah, because
telling
it's still,
me that I
it's still
can't.
saying every live.
Why?
Huh?
I stopped.
Because he said I'm too old.
Yeah.